An elderly woman moves into her millionaire son's house, but soon senses veiled hostility and the cold gestures of her daughter-in-law. When she suspects poisoning, the housemaid becomes an unexpected ally, discreetly protecting her. What started as suspicion ends in an explosive revelation of the truth. The light September rain was falling over New York City when Eleanor got out of the car with difficulty, leaning on her son's firm arm. Her steps were short and hesitant, as if each movement required a silent negotiation between her will and a body that no longer obeyed as it once had. At 73, she carried on her back the weight of a lifetime of work, of sacrifices, of sleepless nights, caring for a home that was never truly hers. Now, standing before that imposing mansion on the Upper East Side, she felt small, almost invisible. The house was everything she had never had. 3 stories of glass and concrete, a garden with century-old trees, an electronic gate that opened with a touch on a cell phone. Everything there breathed money, power, a life far removed from the one she had known, raising Gabriel alone after her husband left, with nothing but debts and heartache. She had cleaned houses, ironed clothes, baked cakes to sell at the farmer's market. All so that her son could study, could have what she never could, and Gabriel had succeeded. He graduated with a degree in business administration, got an MBA abroad, and married. Patricia, a beautiful, sophisticated woman from a traditional New York family. He built an empire in the tech industry, and at 42 was the owner of one of the country's most promising companies. But along the way, something had been lost. Or perhaps it had never truly existed. The connection between mother and son, that look that needs no words, had become faint, like a phone call with static on the line. Eleanor knew the fault wasn't his alone. Gabriel's father had been harsh, authoritarian, one of those men who believed that crying was a sign of weakness and that hugs were unnecessary. Even after he left, his words continued to echo in the boy's upbringing. She tried to compensate, to be both mother and father, but some scars are too deep. Gabriel grew up learning not to show what he felt, to solve everything on his own, to keep a distance even from those he loved most. The front door opened before they even reached the entrance. Patricia appeared on the threshold, wearing an impeccably tailored beige dress, her straight brown hair falling perfectly over her shoulders, her discreet makeup enhancing her delicate features. She was smiling, but Eleanor immediately noticed that the smile didn't reach her eyes. There was something cold in that blue gaze, calculated, as if every gesture were carefully rehearsed. "Welcome, Eleanor." Patricia's voice was melodious, polite, but carried a chilling formality. "It's a pleasure to have you with us." Eleanor forced a smile and murmured a quiet thank you. She felt out of place, like an intruder invading a space that clearly had not been prepared to receive her. She knew she was there out of necessity, not a genuine invitation. In recent months, her health had deteriorated rapidly. Uncontrolled high blood pressure, frequent, dizzy spells, a weakness in her legs that made her stagger without warning. The doctor had been clear she could no longer live alone. She needed care, someone nearby. Gabriel, concerned, had insisted that she move into his house. Patricia hadn't openly objected, but Eleanor had noticed the tension on her daughter-in-law's face when the subject was mentioned. There had been too long a pause, a heavy silence before she agreed with a forced smile and said that, of course, her mother-in-law would always be welcome. But welcome was the last thing Eleanor felt now, crossing that entrance hall with its soaring ceiling, crystal chandeliers hanging like jewels too expensive to be touched. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor, a lonely sound that seemed to amplify her own solitude. "I've prepared the room on the second floor for you," Patricia said, walking ahead with the elegance of someone born to inhabit such spaces. "It's quiet, and it has a pleasant view of the garden. I hope you'll be comfortable." "Thank you, my dear," Eleanor replied, using the term she had always used for other people's daughters-in-law, but which sounded strange there, artificial. Patricia was not her daughter, nor would she ever be. The woman made that clear in every gesture, every measured word. Gabriel walked up the stairs beside his mother, carrying her old floral fabric handbag, as out of place as she was in that luxurious environment. He seemed oblivious to the tension, or perhaps he simply didn't want to see it. He had always been like that since he was little. When something bothered him, he would shut down, build invisible walls, and pretend everything was fine. The room was spacious, well decorated, with light-colored furniture and a king-size bed covered by an immaculate white duvet. There was a nightstand with a delicate lamp, a reading armchair near the window, and a dresser where she could put her few clothes. Everything was clean, organized, perfect, impersonal. "Get some rest, Mom." Gabriel placed the bag on the bed and ran a hand through his thinning hair, a nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. "We'll have dinner together later. We can talk more then. You must be tired from the trip." It wasn't that far. She tried to smile, but he was already turning his back, leaving the room with quick steps like someone fleeing a difficult conversation. Patricia remained at the door for another moment, that polite smile still plastered on her face. "If you need anything, just call. The housekeeper, Maria, is always around. She'll take care of you." And then she too was gone, gently closing the door behind her. Eleanor was left alone in the silence of that room that was too large. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of her own existence. She had always been a strong, determined woman, the kind who doesn't complain and carries on even when everything seems to be falling apart. But there, in that moment, she felt a deep sadness tighten her chest. It wasn't gratitude she felt, nor relief at having a safe roof over her head. It was the painful certainty that she was there because she had no other choice, because her body had betrayed her, because she depended on the goodwill of a son who barely knew her, and a daughter-in-law who clearly saw her as a burden. The following days passed in a strange and uncomfortable routine. Eleanor woke up early, as she had her whole life, but she didn't know what to do with the hours that dragged on before her. She had no function there. She didn't cook, didn't clean, didn't take care of anything. She was a permanent guest in a house where everything already ran without her. Maria, the housekeeper, was a woman in her 50s, dark-haired, with observant eyes and a kind smile. Unlike Patricia, she seemed to genuinely care. She brought breakfast to the room, asked if everything was all right, offered help with sincerity. Eleanor felt that of all the people in that house, Maria was the only one who saw her as a person, not as a problem to be managed. In the first few days, Eleanor tried to integrate. She would go down to the living room, sit on the enormous Italian leather sofa, watch television, or flip through magazines that didn't interest her. Patricia moved through the house with her cold elegance, always busy with something. Charity meetings, lunches with friends, Pilates classes, appointments with her nutritionist. She spoke on the phone, discussing investments, organizing dinners for her husband's clients. When they crossed paths in the living room or the hallway, Patricia always said something polite, always smiled, but there was a calculated distance in every gesture. "Good morning. Eleanor, did you sleep well? Do you need anything? Are you feeling comfortable?" Questions that didn't expect sincere answers, just courteous greetings, empty formulas of politeness. Gabriel left early and came back late. When he was home, he would lock himself in his office to work or take endless calls. Sometimes the three of them would have dinner together, in a heavy silence broken only by superficial conversations about the weather, about some news from the paper, about nothing that truly mattered. Eleanor observed her son's marriage. She noticed that even sharing the same house, Gabriel and Patricia lived in parallel worlds. He was immersed in his work, she in her own universe of appearances and status. They rarely touched, rarely exchanged glances of complicity. It was a functional, convenient union, built on foundations Eleanor didn't quite understand, but which certainly did not include true love. It was in the second week that things began to change, or rather, that Eleanor began to notice what had perhaps always been there. She was coming down for dinner when she heard voices from the kitchen. One was Patricia's, the other Maria's. She stopped in the hallway, not meaning to eavesdrop, but something in the tone of the conversation made her hesitate. "Did you understand, Maria?" Patricia's voice sounded different, harsher, without its practiced softness. "Eleanor's plate must be prepared separately. She has dietary restrictions. The doctor was very clear. Less salt, less fat, nothing fried. I need you to follow this to the letter." "Yes, ma'am, of course." "And one more thing." Patricia paused. "Keep a log of everything. meal times, what she ate, how she reacted. I want to properly monitor her health." Eleanor frowned. It was excessive care, almost invasive. She wasn't a child who needed to be watched. But she swallowed her discomfort and entered the dining room as if she hadn't heard a thing. Dinner was served, a grilled fillet with steamed vegetables for Eleanor, while Gabriel and Patricia ate a creamy risotto that looked delicious. Eleanor ate in silence, tasting the bland food prepared without love, without seasoning, without life. "Is it good, Mum?" Gabriel asked, more out of politeness than real interest. "It's wonderful, son." She lied, because that was what was expected of her. That night, lying in bed, Eleanor felt something strange, a slight dizziness, an undefined malaise that made her turn on her, sighed and squeeze her eyes shut. She tried to ignore it, attributing it to fatigue, the change of environment, the emotional stress of being there. But in the back of her mind, a seed of doubt began to sprout. In the following days, the discomfort continued. Sometimes it was a mild nausea after lunch, other times a headache that wouldn't go away, or an inexplicable weakness that made her dizzy when she stood up. Eleanor tried to talk to Maria about it, but the housekeeper just suggested she rest more, that her body was adjusting. Patricia, when she found out, showed a concern that seemed genuine at first glance, but had something theatrical about it, as if she were playing the role of the devoted daughter-in-law. "We need to take her to the doctor, Gabriel. She's not well. Maybe it's her blood pressure. I'll call Dr. Evans tomorrow." But Eleanor began to notice other details, small gestures, furtive glances, strange coincidences. She noticed that Patricia was always nearby at mealtimes, watching as Maria served the plates. She noticed that her cup of tea tasted slightly different when Patricia was the one who brought it. She noticed that on days when her daughter-in-law traveled or had long appointments, she felt inexplicably better. At first she tried to push these thoughts away. How absurd! What unfounded paranoia! Patricia was polite, solicitous, fulfilling her role as a hostess. Why would she think of harming someone? But the feeling persisted, grew, became impossible to ignore. It was Maria who began to confirm her suspicions, even without saying a word. Eleanor noticed that the housekeeper had started to switch the plates when serving, always ensuring that she ate from the same dish as Gabriel. She noticed that Maria washed her cup personally, never leaving it, in the sink with the others. She noticed the worried glances the housekeeper would cast whenever Patricia entered the kitchen. One afternoon, while Patricia was out and Gabriel was working in his office, Eleanor went down to the kitchen. Maria was preparing lunch, and upon seeing the elderly woman, she offered a tired smile. "Eleanor, you should be resting." "I need to talk to you, Maria." Eleanor sat on one of the counter stools, lowering her voice. "Something is happening in this house, I can feel it, and I think you feel it too." Maria stopped what she was doing, wiped her hands on her apron and looked around, checking if they were truly alone. Her usually calm face was tense, worried. "Eleanor, you're a smart woman," Maria whispered, moving closer. "I can't say much, you understand? But be careful. Don't eat anything that isn't served by me. Don't drink anything that Mrs. Patricia prepares, and if you feel anything strange, tell me immediately." Eleanor's heart raced. So it wasn't her imagination. Something was truly wrong. "Is she trying to harm me?" Eleanor's voice trembled. Maria looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "I have no proof, Eleanor, but I've seen things that don't make sense. Jars that appear and disappear. Mrs. Patricia meddling in places she shouldn't, and you always get worse after eating what she prepares or brings. I can't accuse anyone without being sure, but I can protect you, and that's what I'm doing." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. These were heavy words, accusations that, if true, revealed a wickedness she didn't want to believe was possible. But at the same time, everything began to make sense. Patricia's excessive concern about her diet, the comments about her health, the insistence on controlling her. "My son needs to know this," Eleanor said, almost to herself. Maria shook her head slowly. "Eleanor, Mr. Gabriel is a good man, but he doesn't see it. He works too much, he's always tired, and Mrs. Patricia knows exactly how to keep up appearances. If you tell him without proof, he might not believe you. Worse, he might think you're confused, sick, and then your situation becomes even more vulnerable. So, what do I do? Eleanor's voice was a desperate whisper. You keep eating only what I prepare. You drink only what I serve, and we both keep our eyes wide open. When we're sure, when there's something concrete, then we'll talk to Mr. Gabriel. But right now the priority is to keep you safe. Eleanor nodded, feeling hot tears stream down her wrinkled face. How had she come to this? How had life brought her to a place where she had to be afraid in her own son's house? That night, during dinner, Eleanor watched Patricia with new eyes. She observed every gesture, every look, every word. Her daughter-in-law was too perfect, too controlled. She smiled at the right times, said the right things, moved with the grace of an actress, on stage. But behind that flawless mask, Eleanor could now see something dark, something cold and calculating that made her tremble inside. Gabriel, oblivious to it all, talked about a new company project, excited about numbers and projections. Patricia listened with feigned attention, making pertinent comments, touching her husband's arm from time to time in a gesture that seemed affectionate, but which Eleanor recognized as pure performance. When Maria brought dessert, Eleanor noticed the quick glance the housekeeper shot at Patricia. She noticed how Maria made sure she received the portion that came from the same serving dish as Gabriel. She noticed the discreet relief in the woman's eyes when Eleanor began to eat without any problem. Later, alone in her room, Eleanor looked out the window at the illuminated garden. The trees swayed gently in the night wind, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She thought about everything she had been through in life, all the battles she had fought, all the times she had to be strong when she wanted to fall apart. And now, at an age when she should be resting, protected, loved, she found herself in a silent and invisible battle where the enemy smiled at her every day and wished for her death. Because that was it, Eleanor realized with crystal clarity. Patricia didn't just want her to leave, she wanted her to die. She wanted her to disappear in a way that seemed natural, a weak heart that couldn't take it, a frail health that finally gave way. It would be so convenient, so clean, so perfect. Eleanor lay down that night feeling fear, but also a deep anger beginning to burn inside her. She wasn't going to die like this. She wasn't going to give up. She wasn't going to let that woman win. She had Maria by her side, an unlikely but precious ally, and she had her own resilience forged in decades of struggle. She was going to survive. She was going to find out the truth, and she was going to make her son see what was happening right under his nose. The war was just beginning, and Eleanor, though frail and tired, was ready to fight. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The following weeks dragged on in a routine of vigilance and fear. Eleanor woke up every day with a tightness in her chest, not from the illness that had brought her there, but from the certainty that she was living under the same roof as someone who wished for her death. It was a suffocating, claustrophobic feeling, like being trapped in an invisible cage where every breath had to be calculated. Maria had become her silent guardian. The housekeeper arrived early, even before Patricia woke up, and left late, always making sure Eleanor was safe. They developed their own language made of glances, small gestures, a non-verbal code that needed no words. When Maria blinked twice in a row, it meant danger. When she lightly touched Eleanor's shoulder, it was a signal not to eat or drink what was in front of her. Eleanor's symptoms had improved considerably since Maria had taken full control of her diet. The dizziness lessened, the constant nausea disappeared, and she began to feel a bit more energetic. It was living proof that something was wrong, very wrong, but they still lacked the concrete evidence that would convince Gabriel. Patricia, for her part, seemed frustrated. Eleanor noticed the poorly disguised irritation in her daughter-in-law's eyes when she saw her moving about the house, more energetic and present each day. There were moments when she caught Patricia watching her with an expression that could only be described as restrained anger, a cold hatred that quickly transformed into a smile when she was noticed. "You have more color in your cheeks, Eleanor," Patricia said one morning as they had coffee together on the porch. "It's good to see you're adjusting to the house." "I'm feeling very well, thank you," Eleanor replied, choosing her words carefully. Maria takes very good care of me." Something flickered in Patricia's eyes, a spark of discomfort, perhaps of suspicion. "Yes, Maria is very dedicated, sometimes too dedicated, don't you think?" Eleanor pretended not to understand the insinuation. Dedication is never too much when it comes to caring for someone. The silence that followed was heavy. Patricia stirred her coffee with mechanical movements, her face perfectly composed, but Eleanor could feel the tension emanating from her like heat waves. Gabriel remained oblivious to it all. His world revolved around meetings, negotiations, spreadsheets, and projections. He came home exhausted, could barely keep his eyes open during dinner, and then would lock himself in his office or go straight to his room. Patricia complained about his absence, but always in a mild, almost understanding tone, like a patient wife who accepted the sacrifices necessary for success. Eleanor tried a few times to start a conversation with her son. She wanted to talk about real things, about feelings, about the distance that had grown between them over the years. But Gabriel had a gift for deflecting deep subjects. He always found an excuse, an urgent phone call, an issue he needed to resolve. It was like trying to hug a shadow. One afternoon, however, something changed. Eleanor was in the living room flipping through a book when she heard raised voices coming from the kitchen. She immediately recognized Patricia's voice, louder than usual, and Maria's, trying to remain calm. "You are overstepping your boundaries, Maria," Patricia said in a sharp tone Eleanor had never heard before. "This is my house, and I decide what happens here. I don't need you to question me about anything." "I was just saying that Eleanor needs a balanced diet, ma'am." Maria's voice was firm but respectful. "The doctor recommended variety, not just the same dishes every day." "The doctor recommended what I told him to recommend." Patricia practically spat the words. "And I suggest you remember your place in this house." Eleanor felt her blood boil. She stood up, ignoring the slight dizziness that came over her, and walked to the kitchen. As she entered, she saw Maria with her head down, hands clenched in her apron, while Patricia stared at her with poorly disguised contempt. "Is something wrong?" Eleanor asked, making sure her voice was firm. Patricia turned, and in the blink of an eye the mask was back in place. The polite smile, the elegant posture, the soft voice. "Nothing at all, Eleanor. Just adjusting a few details of the house routine." Maria looked up, and Eleanor saw a mixture of gratitude and concern in her eyes. The housekeeper knew that any wrong word could cost her her job, maybe even worse. But Eleanor also knew she couldn't let it go. "Maria has been an angel to me," Eleanor said, looking directly at Patricia. "I don't know what I would do without her. I hope it stays that way, because I have complete trust in her work." It was a clear message, a boundary set. Patricia understood perfectly. Her smile became even more forced, and she nodded. "Of course, Eleanor, Maria is an important part of this house." But in that moment, something broke for good. If before there had been a silent war, now it was declared. Patricia no longer hid it so well. Her looks at Eleanor were venomous, her gestures more abrupt, her words sharper. Gabriel noticed the change in atmosphere, even if he didn't fully understand it. One night at dinner, he commented that the house felt strange, tense. The two women looked at him, but neither said anything. Patricia blamed the stress of his work, and Eleanor simply agreed, because she knew confronting the situation without proof would be useless. It was in the third week of October that the incident happened. Eleanor woke up in the middle of the night with an unbearable thirst. She got up, staggering, still groggy from sleep, and went down to the kitchen. The house was shrouded in silence, only the distant ticking of the living room clock echoing off the walls. She opened the refrigerator and took out the pitcher of juice that was there. She poured herself a glass, drank half of it in one gulp, feeling the cold liquid go down her throat. She hadn't finished drinking when she felt it, a strange burning sensation, a bitter taste that wasn't there before. Her stomach turned immediately. She dropped the glass in the sink, grabbed onto the counter, her heart racing. What was that? She climbed the stairs with difficulty, each step feeling like a mountain. She locked herself in the bathroom and vomited violently. Cold sweat dripped down her face. Her body trembled uncontrollably. She thought about screaming, calling for help, but something stopped her, a survival instinct that told her not to make a sound, not to draw attention. She spent the night between the bathroom and the bed, tormented by cramps and nausea. When the sun rose, Maria knocked on the door with breakfast, and seeing Eleanor's state, her eyes widened in fright. "Eleanor, what happened?" In a weak voice, Eleanor told her about the juice. Maria turned pale, helped her lie down more comfortably in bed, and ran downstairs. Minutes later, she returned with a grim face. "The pitcher was in the trash, Eleanor. Broken. And there was nothing left inside." Eleanor closed her eyes. Patricia had been quick. She had covered her tracks before anyone could investigate. She was smart, calculating, knew exactly how to act. Maria stayed by Eleanor's side all day, caring for her, bringing chamomile tea, placing cold compresses on her forehead. Patricia appeared in the room once, feigning concern, suggesting they call a doctor. Eleanor refused, saying it was just a passing ailment. When Gabriel arrived that night and learned his mother was sick, he went up immediately to see her. There was genuine concern on his face, but also that distance that had always been there. He held her hand, asked if she was better, said he would take her to the doctor the next day. "There's no need, son, I'm feeling fine now, it was just an upset stomach." "Even so, Mum, it's better to check. Your health is fragile." Patricia was at the door, observing the scene with that smile that no longer fooled Eleanor. And in that moment, the elderly woman made a decision. She was going to tell Gabriel. She was going to let it all out, even without concrete proof, because she couldn't go on living in this constant fear. "Gabriel, I need to talk to you." Eleanor's voice trembled, but she was determined. "It's about something that's happening in this house." Her son looked at her, confused. "Now? You're sick, Mum. Can it wait until tomorrow?" "It can't. It's important." Patricia took a step forward, her expression still controlled, but Eleanor saw the panic hidden there. "Gabriel, your mother needs to rest. You can talk tomorrow when she's feeling better." But Eleanor wasn't going to give up. "Son, I think someone is putting something in my food." The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel blinked a few times as if unsure he had heard correctly. "What?" "I think they're trying to poison me." The word fell like a bomb in the room. Patricia brought a hand to her chest, feigning shock. "Eleanor, what an absurd thing to say. How can you say something like that?" Gabriel looked from his mother to his wife, clearly lost. "Mom, you're confused? No one here would do something like that." "I know what I'm feeling, Gabriel." Eleanor tried to sit up in bed, but she was too weak. "My food tastes strange. I get sick after eating certain things. And tonight, I drank that juice and was sick all night." Patricia let out a laugh that sounded genuinely surprised. "Darling, your mother is delirious. It must be the fever. Maybe she has an infection. We need to get her to a doctor urgently." "I'm not delirious." Eleanor looked directly at her son, pleading for him to believe her. "Please, Gabriel, listen to me. Something is wrong here." But Gabriel was already backing away, that look of discomfort appearing whenever he dealt with strong emotions. "Mom, you're very stressed. The move here, your fragile health, it's all making you paranoid. Tomorrow we'll go to the doctor, run some tests, and you'll see it's nothing like that. Gabriel, please. Rest now, okay?" His voice was gentle but firm, as if he were talking to a stubborn child. "We'll talk calmly tomorrow." And then he left the room, Patricia behind him, casting one last look at Eleanor that clearly said, "You lost." Eleanor was left alone, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. She had tried, she had sounded the alarm, but it wasn't enough. Gabriel hadn't believed her. Worse, he now thought she was confused, perhaps senile, losing her mind. Maria returned shortly after, bringing a warm broth and a look of infinite compassion. "I heard everything, Eleanor. I'm so sorry." "He doesn't believe me." "I know, but don't give up. We'll find a way to prove it." "How?" Eleanor sobbed. "She's too smart. She covers all her tracks." Maria sat on the edge of the bed, holding Eleanor's trembling hand. Every criminal makes a mistake sooner or later. We just need to be watching when that mistake happens. That night, lying in the darkness, Eleanor realized she was completely alone. Her son didn't believe her. The woman trying to kill her was free to continue, and she depended only on Maria, a housekeeper who also had her job and her life at risk. But Eleanor had survived worse things. She had raised a son alone, worked to the bone, faced loneliness and poverty. She wasn't going to give up now. She wasn't going to let Patricia win. The next day, Gabriel took her to the doctor as promised. Dr. Evans, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, examined her carefully. He measured her blood pressure, ordered blood tests, asked questions about her symptoms. Eleanor thought about telling him her suspicions, but realized it would be useless. The doctor was already looking at her with that expression they use for confused elderly people. "Eleanor, you're a bit anemic and your blood pressure is fluctuating quite a bit. I'm going to adjust your medication and order some more detailed tests, but it seems to me it's more a matter of adjustment and emotional stress than anything physically serious." There it was again. Emotional stress, adjustment. Nice words to say. They thought she was imagining things. When they returned home, Patricia was in the living room, waiting. "So, what did the doctor say?" "Nothing serious," Gabriel replied. "Just needs some adjustments to her medication." What a relief. Patricia smiled, but her eyes were cold. "I was so worried about your delusions yesterday." "They weren't delusions," Eleanor muttered, but no one heard her. The following days were unbearably tense. Patricia went back to acting with her calculated efficiency, always nearby, always watchful. Eleanor ate only what Maria prepared, drank only water that the housekeeper brought in a sealed bottle, and slept with her door locked. And then, one November afternoon, as Eleanor was on the porch trying to read a book, she saw something that would change everything. Patricia was in the kitchen, and through the window, Eleanor could see her clearly. Her daughter-in-law took a small jar from a high cabinet, looked around to make sure she was alone, and poured a white powder into a cup. She stirred it well, added tea, and stirred again. Eleanor's heart nearly stopped. She was seeing it with her own eyes. She finally had her proof. But then Maria entered the kitchen, and Patricia quickly hid the jar, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Maria, could you take this tea to Eleanor? She must be cold out there." Maria took the cup, but Eleanor saw the suspicion on the housekeeper's face. She saw as Maria left the kitchen, and instead of going straight to the porch, passed by the guest bathroom. Minutes later, she appeared with another cup, identical, but clearly different. "Your tea, Eleanor," Maria said aloud, blinking twice. Eleanor understood. That was not the cup Patricia had prepared. Maria had switched it. Once again, she had saved her life. That night, when Gabriel arrived, Eleanor and Maria were waiting for him in the office. They had planned everything beforehand. It was time to act. "Son, I need you to listen to me carefully." Eleanor's voice was firm, with no room for doubt. "I saw it. This afternoon I saw Patricia put something in my tea." Gabriel sighed, tired. "Mom, let's not start this again." "I saw it too, sir," Maria interrupted. "And I've seen other things. Mrs. Patricia has a jar hidden in the kitchen cabinet. She puts the contents in Eleanor's drinks when she thinks no one is looking." Gabriel looked at the two women before him. His mother, frail but determined. His trusted housekeeper, serious and concerned. For the first time he saw something there that he couldn't simply ignore. "Are you serious?" "Completely, Gabriel," Eleanor said. "And I'm asking you as your mother to investigate. Open that cabinet, look for the jar, have what's inside analyzed." Her son was silent for a long moment, processing. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, I'll check." And with that promise, for the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt a spark of hope light up in her chest. The truth was about to come out, and Patricia, in all her arrogance, had no idea of the storm that was approaching. The next 3 days were filled with a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Gabriel had adopted a different posture, more attentive, more present. Eleanor noticed her son observing details that had previously gone unnoticed. Patricia's movements around the house, the exchange of glances between her and Maria, small gestures that gained meaning when watched closely. Patricia, for her part, seemed to sense that something had changed. She was more nervous, more controlling. She began to frequent the kitchen more regularly, always finding excuses to be nearby when meals were prepared. Her eyes followed Maria with an intensity that bordered on paranoia, and Eleanor could feel the fear growing in her daughter-in-law, even as she tried to hide it with her perfect smile and impeccable manners. Gabriel said nothing about his investigation. He continued to leave for work, return at night, maintaining his usual routine. But Eleanor knew something was happening behind the scenes. She saw in her son's expressions the same concentration he always had when solving a complex problem. He was putting the pieces of the puzzle together, one by one, with the same methodology he used in business. On the fourth night after their conversation in the office, Gabriel came home early. He found Eleanor in the living room, reading under the soft light of a lamp. He sat beside her, a rare occurrence, and for the first time in a long time he held her hand. "Mom, I need to tell you something." Eleanor's heart quickened. "Tell me, son." "I went to the kitchen cabinet. I found the jar you and Maria mentioned." Eleanor held her breath. "And?" "I took a sample of the powder inside. I had it analyzed at a private lab, without giving any names, without explaining anything. I said it was for a company project." He paused, and Eleanor saw the pain in her son's eyes. The kind of pain that comes when the reality we've always denied finally catches up to us. "The results came in today. It's rat poison, Mum. Rat poison mixed with other compounds that would make it difficult to detect in simple tests. In small doses over time, it would cause exactly the symptoms you've had: dizziness, nausea, weakness, liver and kidney problems. Eventually it would lead to multiple organ failure that would look like a natural death in an elderly person with fragile health." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were of relief. Relief at finally being believed, at not being crazy, at having managed to survive until that moment. "I'm so sorry, Mum." Gabriel squeezed her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you sooner, for thinking you were delusional. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. You see it now, son, that's what matters. There's something else." Gabriel took a deep breath. "I also took samples of your drinks, the ones Maria prepared and the ones Patricia offered. I had them all analyzed. Maria's are clean, but in a cup that was in your room, one I had seen Patricia take to you the other day, they found traces of the same substance." Eleanor closed her eyes. It was real. It was all terribly real. "What are you going to do now?" "I'm going to confront her. Tonight." Gabriel stood up, and there was a determination in his face that Eleanor recognized from the few times she had seen him truly angry. "But first I want you to know something. I love you, Mom. I know I don't show it. I know I've been distant my whole life. But you are the most important person in my life, and no one is going to hurt you. Ever again." It was the first time in decades that Eleanor had heard those words. The boy who had been raised not to show emotion was there, vulnerable, honest, human. She stood up with difficulty and hugged her son, smelling the familiar scent that took her back to the times when he was small and she was everything to him. "I love you too, son. I always have." They stayed like that for a long moment, until they heard the sound of the front door opening. Patricia had arrived from a charity dinner, wearing a navy blue dress that highlighted her natural elegance. She entered the living room with her usual smile, but upon seeing mother and son embracing, something faltered on her face. "What a lovely scene," she said, her voice sounding forced. "Am I interrupting something?" "Yes." Gabriel let go of his mother and turned to his wife. "I need to talk to you now, in the office." Patricia blinked, confused. "Now?" "But I just got home, I'm tired." "It's not a request, Patricia. It's an order." Something in his voice made Patricia's mask crack slightly. She looked from Gabriel to Eleanor, trying to decipher what was happening. "All right, dear, of course." The three of them went into the office. Gabriel closed the door, locked it, and turned to his wife with an expression Eleanor had never seen before. It was controlled anger, deep disappointment, and something that looked a lot like disgust. "Sit down, Patricia." She sat in the leather armchair, still trying to maintain her composure. "Gabriel, you're scaring me. What's going on?" He placed an envelope on the desk, pushing it toward her. "Open it." With trembling fingers, Patricia opened the envelope and pulled out the lab reports. Her eyes scanned the pages, and Eleanor saw the exact moment she understood. The color drained from her face, her lips parted slightly, her hands began to shake. "I can explain," her voice came out weak, desperate. "Can you?" Gabriel crossed his arms. "Then explain to me how rat poison ended up in my mother's food. Explain how a lethal substance was in the drinks you prepared for her. Explain why you were trying to kill the woman who gave birth to me." Patricia looked up, and there Eleanor saw raw, naked panic. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand." "Then make me understand." Gabriel's voice was dangerously calm. There was a long silence. Patricia looked from Gabriel to Eleanor, searching for a way out, a way to escape. But there was nowhere left to run. The proof was there, undeniable, concrete. "She was ruining everything." The words came out in a desperate rush. "Ever since she got here, nothing has been the same. You only had eyes for her. The house turned into a hospital. Our dinners, our trips, our social life, everything had to be adjusted because of her. I couldn't stand it anymore." "So you decided to kill her?" Gabriel practically shouted. "Is that what you're telling me?" "I wasn't going to let it actually happen." Patricia was crying now, her makeup running down her face. "I was going to stop before it got serious. I just wanted her to get sick enough to need a hospital, a nursing home, anywhere but here." "Liar." Eleanor spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the pain. "You wanted me to die. You wanted it to look natural, so you could go on with your perfect life without the inconvenient mother-in-law in the way." Patricia turned to her with a fury that finally broke the surface. "You should never have come here. This is my house, my life. You're an intruder." "She is my mother," Gabriel intervened, his voice like steel. "And this house is also hers for as long as she wants to stay." "You don't understand." Patricia was completely out of control now. "You never understand anything. You're always working, absent, leaving me alone in this huge house. And when we could finally have time together, you bring your sick mother to live here. I sacrificed everything for this marriage, my career, my dreams, my freedom. And in return, what do you give me? Loneliness and a mother-in-law to take care of." Gabriel looked at the woman he had been married to for 8 years and realized he had never truly known her. The person before him was a stranger, someone capable of committing a heinous crime out of pure convenience, out of selfishness, for a comfortable life that allowed no imperfections. "You're leaving this house. Now." Gabriel's voice was final. "I'm giving you half an hour to pack your personal belongings. The rest stays. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow to handle the divorce." "You can't do this to me." Patricia stood up, desperate. "I'm your wife." "You're a criminal, and if I send these reports to the police, you'll go to jail." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Patricia knew she was cornered. She could scream, she could cry, she could beg, but there was no going back. Her choices had led her here, and now she would have to face the consequences. "Please," she whispered, "don't do that. I'll leave. I'll disappear. But don't report me. My family, my name, everything will be destroyed." Gabriel looked at his mother. Eleanor saw the doubt in her son's eyes. She saw that despite everything, he still felt something for that woman, still had memories of happy moments they had shared. She saw the internal battle between justice and compassion. "Let her go, son," Eleanor said softly. "Let her carry the weight of what she's done. That's punishment enough." Gabriel nodded slowly. "You have 30 minutes, and I never want to see your face again. If you try to contact me, if you try to get near my mother, I'll send everything to the police, understood?" Patricia nodded, defeated. She stood up and staggered out of the office, her elegance replaced by the hunched posture of someone carrying the weight of their own villainy. Eleanor and Gabriel were left alone in the office. Her son sank into the chair, covering his face with his hands. He was crying, silent tears of someone who has lost something they thought they had, of someone who has discovered they lived in an illusion. Eleanor sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's going to be okay, son. How did I not see it? How did I marry a person like that? And not realize? Because you saw what you wanted to see. You saw the beautiful, intelligent woman who seemed perfect for your world, but you never looked at what was behind the mask. I failed you, Mom. I failed as a son, as a protector, as a man. You didn't fail, you were just learning." Eleanor squeezed his shoulder affectionately. "Life is like that. We make mistakes, we learn, we grow. The important thing is that you're here now, seeing the truth, doing what's right. I could have lost you, but you didn't. I'm here and we'll move forward together." They stayed like that in the silence of the office, while upstairs Patricia packed her bags. Maria appeared discreetly at the door, and Eleanor waved for her to come in. "Is everything okay, Maria?" Gabriel asked, wiping his tears. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Patricia is packing. I just came to see if you needed anything." "Thank you, Maria." Gabriel stood up and extended his hand to the housekeeper. "Thank you for taking care of my mother when I didn't know how. You saved her life." Maria shook his hand, moved. "I just did what was right, sir." "No, you did more than that. You were the only one who saw, who acted, who protected, and I will never forget that." 40 minutes later, Patricia came down the stairs carrying 2 suitcases. Her face was swollen from crying, her makeup completely smeared. She didn't look at anyone. She simply crossed the living room, opened the door and left, calling a cab on her phone. Eleanor watched from the window as the car drove away, taking with it the woman who had tried to take her life. She felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness for her son, anger for what she had suffered, but also a strange sense of victory. She had survived. She had fought. She had won. That night was the first in a long time that Eleanor slept soundly, without fear, without waking up in a panic. She knew there was still much to be resolved, conversations to be had, wounds to be healed. But the worst was over. The next morning, Gabriel didn't go to work. He made breakfast himself, something he hadn't done in years. Toast, scrambled eggs, fresh orange juice. He served his mother with a clumsy but genuine affection and sat beside her to eat, together. "You know, Mom, I spent my whole life thinking that showing affection was a sign of weakness. My father taught me that, but I was wrong." "Your father was wrong, son. Loving isn't weakness. It's the only thing that makes us truly strong. I want to change. I want to be different, not because of what happened with Patricia, but for me, for you, for us." Eleanor smiled, taking her son's hand across the table. "Then let's change together." The following days were about reorganization. Gabriel hired a lawyer to handle the divorce, explaining only that there were irreconcilable differences. The evidence of the poisoning was kept safe, a guarantee in case Patricia tried anything. But she didn't. She disappeared into the big city, probably back to her family's home, carrying the dark secret of what she had done. Eleanor started physical therapy to regain her lost strength. Without the daily poison in her system, her body began to heal. The color returned to her face, her appetite came back, the dizziness stopped. It was like being reborn. Gabriel reduced his workload. He started coming home earlier, spending weekends at home, truly talking with his mother. They watched movies together, cooked, reminisced about the past. Slowly, the bond that had been stretched to its breaking point began to mend, stronger and more genuine than ever. Maria continued to work in the house, but now as a genuine part of the family. Gabriel increased her salary and gave her better time off. She laughed more, seemed lighter, happy to see that the nightmare was over and that Eleanor was finally safe. One afternoon, 2 months after Patricia left, Gabriel came home with a different sparkle in his eyes. He sat with his mother on the porch, where she was having her afternoon tea. "Mom, I've made a decision." "What decision, son?" "I'm going to sell the company." Eleanor almost dropped her cup. "What?" "I spent my whole life building that, working non-stop, thinking success was the only thing that mattered. But I almost lost you because of it. I almost didn't see what was happening in my own home." Gabriel took a deep breath. I don't want that life anymore, Mom. I want something different, something that truly makes sense. And what do you want to do? He smiled, a genuine smile Eleanor hadn't seen in years. Remember when I was a kid? We used to go to that coffee shop near our house. You always ordered a cornbread muffin and a latte, and I would sit there drawing while you talked with the other mums. I remember. That was our spot. I want to open a coffee shop, Mum. Small, cozy, in a neighborhood that needs a space like that. I want to bake cakes like the ones you used to sell at the market. I want to serve honest coffee, welcome people, build a community. I want something simple, but real. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. Son, are you sure? Absolutely, and I want it to be our project, yours and mine. We'll do it together. And so, on a sunny summer afternoon, mother and son sealed a new beginning. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be without challenges, but it would be honest, it would be real, it would be theirs. The truth had prevailed, not through shouting or violence, but through the silent observation of a dedicated housekeeper, the courage of an elderly woman to report what was happening, and finally, the decision of a son to open his eyes and see reality. Evil had tried to win in the shadows, but good, even in its apparent fragility, proved to be stronger, and a new life was just beginning. The following months were a time of transformation. Gabriel sold his company for an amount that would ensure his comfort for the rest of his life, but more important than the money was the sense of freedom he felt upon signing the papers. It was as if he were releasing a weight he had carried on his back for decades, an anchor that had kept him tied to a life that had never truly made him happy. The house on the Upper East Side was put up for sale. Gabriel explained to his mother that the place held bad memories, shadows they couldn't completely erase. Eleanor agreed without hesitation. To her, that mansion had never been a home, only a gilded cage where she had nearly met her end. They bought a smaller house in Greenwich Village, on a tree-lined street where you could still hear birds singing in the morning. 3 bedrooms, a garden with a crabapple tree, a porch with a hammock. Simple, cozy, perfect. Maria got her own room with a view of the garden, and a salary that made her smile every time she received it. While the move was happening, Gabriel and Eleanor dedicated themselves to the coffee shop. They found a commercial spot in the West Village, near a park, where children played and old men played dominoes. The space had large windows that let in natural light, old hardwood floors that Gabriel insisted on restoring, and exposed brick walls that gave it a warm, inviting feel. Eleanor was involved in every decision. She chose the colors of the curtains, suggested the shape of the tables, designed the kitchen layout. Gabriel listened to every opinion with genuine attention, and sometimes they disagreed, debated, but always with respect and affection. These were conversations they had never had before, real dialogues between 2 people who were learning to truly know each other. The name of the coffee shop was Eleanor's idea. Eleanor's Place. Simple, direct, honest. Gabriel loved it immediately. He had a hand-carved wooden sign made with delicate cursive letters, and on the day they hung it on the facade, they both cried. The decor was put together gradually with pieces that told stories, old photographs of New York City framed on the walls. A Singer sewing machine that had belonged to Eleanor's grandmother transformed into a side table. Shelves with books that customers could read while sipping their coffee. Hanging plants in the windows. Every detail was designed to create an atmosphere where people felt at home. Eleanor went back to baking her cakes. Cornbread muffins with jam, carrot cake with chocolate frosting, orange cake with a glaze. Recipes from her childhood, passed down from her mother, her grandmother, from generations of women who cooked with love. Gabriel learned to make artisanal bread, waking up before dawn to knead the dough, wait for it to rise and bake it to perfection. It was manual, almost meditative work that connected him to something essential that had always been missing in his life. Maria took over the counter, serving customers with her gentle and efficient manner. She memorized the regulars' orders, knew who liked their coffee stronger, who preferred chamomile tea, who had a gluten intolerance. She became the heart of Eleanor's Place, the person who knew everyone and made everyone feel special. The grand opening was on an April morning, as autumn began to paint the leaves yellow. Gabriel woke up nervous, with that feeling in his stomach he hadn't felt since childhood. Eleanor noticed and held his hand across the breakfast table. "It's going to be okay, son. We built this together. And no matter what happens, it's already been worth it." "Why's that, Mom?" "Because you came back to me. Because I found you again. Because we are finally a real family." Gabriel hugged his mother right there in the kitchen of their new home and silently thanked whatever forces had guided them through everything they had endured, because without the darkness, perhaps they would never have found the light. Eleanor's place opened its doors at 8 in the morning. The first few hours were slow. Just a few curious people who came in, looked around, ordered a coffee, and left. But around 10, something magical began to happen. An elderly woman came in, ordered a cornbread muffin, and upon tasting it, her eyes filled with tears. "This tastes like my childhood," she said, "like when my mother used to make it on her wood-fired stove." The word spread. By the end of the afternoon, the coffee shop was full. Mothers with small children, students with open books, couples holding hands, workers on their lunch break. There was laughter, lively conversations, the comforting sound of cups clinking on saucers. Gabriel looked around and realized they had created not just a business, but a meeting place, a space for human connection in a city that sometimes felt too big and cold. Eleanor moved between the tables, chatting with customers, telling stories about the recipes, laughing with sincerity. She was radiant, full of life, a far cry from the frail woman who had arrived at that mansion months ago. The poison had left not only her body, but also her soul. She had allowed herself to be reborn. In the following months, Eleanor's place became a neighborhood landmark. They received positive reviews on food blogs, were mentioned in magazines, but most important were the loyal customers who returned day after day. Mrs. Irene, who lived alone and found a second family there. Mr. Joaquin, a retiree who played chess at the corner table every afternoon. Carol and Brian, a couple who met in the coffee line and now celebrated every important moment there. Gabriel discovered he had a knack for business in a completely different way than he had known before. It wasn't about cold numbers and maximum profits. It was about relationships, about creating something that improved people's lives, even in a small, everyday way. He woke up happy, worked with purpose, and slept content. For the first time in his adult life, he felt he was in the right place. Eleanor blossomed with each passing day. Her health improved so much that her doctors were amazed. Her blood pressure stabilized. The dizziness disappeared completely. Even the arthritis that had bothered her for years seemed to ease. She laughed more, talked more, lived more. It was as if time had turned back and returned a better version of herself. One afternoon, 6 months after the opening, Gabriel was cleaning tables when he saw Maria standing in the kitchen doorway, looking thoughtfully at the bustling cafe. He approached her. "What are you thinking about, Maria?" She smiled, that calm smile of someone who has found their place in the world. "I was thinking about how life comes full circle, Mr. Gabriel. A while ago I thought I was going to lose my job, that Mrs. Patricia was going to fire me for protecting Eleanor. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to support my daughter, that I'd be lost. And look where we are now." Gabriel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You made all this happen, Maria. Without you, my mother wouldn't be here. And without my mother, I'd still be lost in that empty life. You saved 2 people when you decided to do the right thing. I just did what any decent person would do. No. Most would have kept quiet, afraid of losing their job, of getting into trouble. You were brave. And I will be eternally grateful for that." Maria wiped away a discreet tear. "Working here's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I feel like I'm not just serving coffee, I'm helping to build something beautiful." "You are." Gabriel looked around at the space that breathed life and warmth. "We're building something beautiful. All of us." The seasons passed. Fall gave way to winter, with its cold, rainy mornings that made the coffee shop even more inviting. People came in seeking hot chocolate, a warm slice of cake, an invisible hug that only places like this can provide. Gabriel started dating again. He met Paula, a literature professor who frequented Eleanor's place on Saturdays to grade papers. She was different from Patricia in every way, simple, genuine, with an easy smile and an open heart. Eleanor liked her from their first meeting, and that was enough for Gabriel. They had agreed that this time he would listen to his mother's intuition. Gabriel's sex life had also changed. With Paula it was different. There wasn't that cold, mechanical urgency that had marked his marriage to Patricia. There was time, there was conversation, there were laughs in the middle of their intimate moments. It was a connection that went beyond the physical, that involved vulnerability and trust. Gabriel allowed himself to be imperfect, to be himself, and discovered that this was infinitely more satisfying. Eleanor watched her son flourish in this new relationship and felt her heart swell. It wasn't just the joy of seeing him happy, but the certainty that he had finally learned to truly love, to allow himself to be loved, to build something genuine with someone. On a particularly busy afternoon, a year after the opening, Eleanor was sitting at her favorite table near the window when a woman entered. She was young, maybe in her 30s, carrying a small child. She ordered a coffee and a cake, sat near Eleanor, and the two began to talk naturally, as happens in welcoming places. "Are you the owner here?" the young woman asked. "I'm one of the owners," Eleanor smiled, "along with my son. What a beautiful place. I feel at home here." The woman looked around. "You know, I've been through some really hard times recently. My marriage ended. I had to start over from scratch with my daughter. And coming here has been a breath of fresh air, a place where I feel safe." Eleanor felt a pang of identification in her chest. "I understand exactly what you mean. I've been through hard times too, very hard times. But this is our new beginning, and I'm glad it can be yours too." The two talked for another hour, sharing stories, exchanging experiences, creating that instant connection that sometimes happens between strangers who recognize their own battles in each other. When the young woman left, thanking her with tears in her eyes, Eleanor realized that Eleanor's place was more than a coffee shop. It was a refuge, a place of healing, a space where broken people could find comfort and hope. Gabriel witnessed the scene from a distance and understood. He understood that his mother had not only survived an assassination attempt, but had transformed that terrible experience into something beautiful and meaningful. She had taken the pain and turned it into fuel to create a place that eased the pain of others. It was the most powerful revenge possible against evil, to answer it with multiplied kindness. The first anniversary of Eleanor's place was celebrated with a party. They invited all the regulars, decorated the space with balloons and flowers, and prepared a huge cake. Mr. Joaquin made an emotional toast, thanking them for creating a place where he didn't feel lonely. Mrs. Irene cried as she remembered how the coffee shop had saved her from depression after her husband's death. Carol and Brian announced they were engaged and that the proposal had happened right there, at the same table where they first met. Eleanor looked at it all, at the people laughing and talking, at her son embracing Paula, at Maria serving coffee with her wide smile, and felt a deep gratitude. She had almost died. She had been betrayed, poisoned, pushed to the edge of an abyss, but she hadn't fallen. And on the other side of that abyss, she had found a life she had never imagined possible. Gabriel gave a short but emotional speech. "A year ago, I was lost. I was living a life that didn't belong to me, in a marriage that was a lie, blind to what really mattered. My mother almost died, and it took getting that close to losing her for me to wake up." He looked at Eleanor with love. "Thank you, Mom, for being strong when I was weak, for surviving when the world conspired against you, for teaching me that it's never too late to start over. This coffee shop is for you, but it's also because of you, because you saved me as much as I tried to save you." Everyone applauded. Eleanor stood up, hugged her son, and whispered in his ear, "We saved each other, son, and we'll keep saving each other every day." The party continued late into the night. There was music, impromptu dancing, shared stories. When everyone had left and they were alone cleaning up, there was a peace in the air, a feeling that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Maria was the last to leave. Before she went, she hugged Eleanor and Gabriel. Thank you for letting me be a part of all this. You are the family I chose. And you are the sister I never had, Eleanor replied. The protector who appeared when I needed you most. When they were alone, Gabriel and Eleanor sat at one of the tables, tired but satisfied. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with everything that didn't need to be said. Have you ever thought about what would have happened if things were different? Gabriel asked. If Patricia had succeeded, if Maria hadn't been paying attention, if you hadn't been strong enough to speak up. Eleanor thought for a moment. I think about it sometimes, but then I realize there's no point in living in the what-ifs. Life is made of choices, and each of us made ours. Patricia chose poison. Maria chose to protect me. You chose to believe, and I chose to fight. In the end, the right choices won. Do you think Patricia is okay? Somewhere out there? I don't know, son. And honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. She made her bed. Now she has to lie in it. I hope one day she understands what she did, that she feels true remorse, but that's between her and her conscience. Have you forgiven her? Eleanor sighed. I don't know if I've forgiven her, but I've stopped carrying the anger. Anger is heavy, son, and I've carried enough weight in my life. Now I want lightness. I want to laugh. I want to live. I want to bake cakes and welcome people to this wonderful place we've built. Forgiveness will come or it won't, but either way, she no longer has power over me. Gabriel nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. They stood up, turned off the lights, locked the door. They walked through the streets of Greenwich Village back home, side by side, mother and son, united by a bond that had been tested to its limit and had emerged even stronger. The following years brought more transformations. Gabriel and Paula married in a simple ceremony in the garden of Eleanor's place, with their beloved customers as guests. Maria was the maid of honor. Eleanor cried with happiness and baked the wedding cake with her own hands. The coffee shop expanded. They opened a second location on the Upper West Side, then a third in Soho. But the original Eleanor's place in the West Village remained the heart of it all. It was there that Eleanor spent her mornings, chatting with customers, trying new recipes, simply existing fully. Gabriel became a different kind of businessman. He didn't seek maximum profits but sustainability and purpose. He paid fair wages, offered real benefits, and treated his employees like family. Eleanor's place was profitable, yes, but more importantly, it was an ethical, humane business built on values that mattered. Eleanor lived to see her grandson born. Samuel, named in honor of the grandfather she had loved despite everything. The boy grew up running between the tables of the coffee shop, learning to make bread with his father, listening to his grandmother's stories of hard times and overcoming them. And always, Eleanor told Samuel about Maria, about how a brave housekeeper had saved her life just by doing what was right, about how kindness overcomes evil, even when evil seems stronger, about how we should never ignore our conscience, even when it puts us at risk. Maria stayed at Eleanor's place until she retired years later. On the day of her farewell, there was another party, this time in her honor. She cried as she received a plaque with her name that would be permanently fixed in the coffee shop, Maria Santos, guardian and friend. Eleanor hugged her and whispered, "You didn't just save my life. You taught me that there are still good people in the world." The story of Eleanor and Gabriel became a neighborhood legend. People knew there was something special there, a deep connection between mother and son that transcended the ordinary. They didn't know the dark details, they didn't know the story of poison and betrayal. But they felt the authenticity, the real love that permeated every corner of that place. Eleanor lived to be 88, lucid and active until the end. She spent her final years exactly where she wanted to be, at Eleanor's place, baking cakes, talking with customers, being a present grandmother to Samuel and the two siblings who came after. When she passed, it was in peace, surrounded by the family she had built not just of blood, but of choice and love. Gabriel was by her side, holding her hand, thanking her for every moment they had together, for every new beginning she had made possible. The funeral was held at Eleanor's place. Hundreds of people attended. Customers she had touched over the years, people whose lives were better for having known this lady, with a sweet smile and unwavering inner strength. Maria, now elderly herself, was there, mourning the friend life had given her. Gabriel gave one last speech, his voice thick with emotion but firm. My mother survived things that should have destroyed anyone. She was betrayed, poisoned, pushed toward death. But she didn't just survive, she thrived. She turned poison into love, betrayal, into trust, near death into a full life. And she taught us that evil can be strong, but kindness is always stronger, that we can start over at 70, at 80, at any age, that it's never too late to choose love. Eleanor's place is still open today. Gabriel runs it with the same care his mother had. And now Samuel, a grown man, works alongside his father. On the main wall, there is a framed photograph of Eleanor smiling, wearing a floral apron, her hands dusted with flour. Below it, a plaque reads, "In memory of Eleanor Santos." She turned, poison into love, and taught us that the truth always finds a way. And there, in that welcoming space born from pain, but flourishing in joy, Eleanor's story lives on, reminding everyone who visits that evil may attack in silence, but good also acts silently. That sometimes the most invisible people, like attentive housekeepers, are the true heroes. That the love between a mother and son can be rebuilt, even when it seems lost forever. And that, in the end, always, always, love wins. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Eleanor, Gabriel, and Maria has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of survival, new beginnings, and redemption, please leave a like on this episode, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Was it Maria's courage, Eleanor's strength, Gabriel's transformation? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, showing how we can be reborn even when all seems lost. Each episode is a new journey, a new invitation to reflect on our own lives and choices. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode, with another story that will make you feel, think, and believe that it's always possible to start over. A warm hug, and see you soon.